What is it that happy people do and how do they think? Happy people are resilient people. Acceptance is power. Acceptance allows us to move on. You do your best and you move on. The less that we are attached to a result, the less we become desperate, then the more likely it is that something's going to happen. I had 77 rejections before I got a book published. Maybe you'll only need 30 rejections, or maybe you'll need 100 before you get a book published. But does it really matter? So long as you keep going, and so long as you keep trying to tweak that manuscript and make it better, resilient people find purpose in whatever is happening in their life. In other words, they may say, I wouldn't have chosen to be in this situation, but what am I learning and how am I becoming a better person? Look for good things every day, because we find what we look for.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou. And boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a legend in the personal development space. He is one of the world's all-time best-selling authors in this space. He has written some incredible books. The first of his books that I read was called Being Happy. He also then wrote another book that I loved and sold a gazillion copies called Making Friends. And since then, he's written countless other international global bestsellers, reaching and uplifting the lives of millions and millions of people. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary Andrew Matthews. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hey, Nikki, nice to be with you. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. So, Andrew, my listener who listens to this show is a seeker. They tend to be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial, and they come to the show not because of me, because I'm here every week. They're here for you. They want to learn from you. But before they can do that, they got to get to know you. So tell us your backstory. How'd you get to become the great Andrew Matthews?
Well, I thought as a teenager that I would either be Prime Minister of Australia or at least a lawyer. And but then I thought, well, I started law school and I didn't enjoy it at all. And I had another love, which was drawing and painting. So I took myself to art school in America, actually the Art Students League of New York. And so then I was going to be an artist. And into my 20s, I discovered that a lot of people were happier than I was. And I was trying to figure out, why are so many of my friends happier than me? What is it that happy people do and how do they think? And that took me into a journey of reading and doing courses. And after a couple of years, I discovered that a lot of the books that I was reading seemed to have good information, but they were fairly boring. And I wondered if, using my drawing skills and cartooning, love for cartooning, if I could write a simpler book, if I could write a book for people who hate self-help books. And so that led to Being Happy. I completed the manuscript and I sent it to publishers around the world, and they weren't that enthusiastic. But eventually, in Singapore, I found a small publisher who said, we think that we can take this book to the market. And so Being Happy was released. And from a shaky start, from an unknown author, Being Happy is now sold, I think, 3 million copies. So that then led to a series of other books, Making Friends, which was about relationships somewhat, Follow Your Heart, which was a book for people who are wanting to enjoy their work. How do we find meaning in going to work every day, and how can we perhaps do work that we love? I did a book for teenagers, Being a Happy Teen, a book during the GFC called Happiness in Hard Times, a book, How Life Works, which was really a bit of an exploration of I suppose, metaphysics and how it is that this world works and how our thoughts create the life we have. And then more recently, my latest book, Bouncing Back, how we rebound from disaster and disappointment.
I love all of these. I've read a number of them, and I'm looking forward to reading your latest book as well. But let's delve into the story of the adversity you faced in getting your first book published, because there's a lot of people that have big dreams, and
Yep.
when they hit a little bit of adversity, many of them, well, they get discouraged and they stop. You sent your book, your manuscript, to, I'm sure, dozens of publishers around the world. What had you continue to move forward with no loss of enthusiasm in the face of so many people saying, "Now we're not that interested"?
Well, actually, we've got to backtrack a bit, because before Being Happy, which was the first book that I ever got published, there was a children's book that I wrote.
Okay.
And I'd heard that it can be tough to get published. So when I finished the manuscript of my children's book, I thought I had a brilliant strategy. I thought, if I get the names of the 60 major publishers in the English language in the world, and I make 60 copies of this manuscript of my children's book, and I send it to all of those publishers at once, then I'm not going to be waiting to see if one publisher likes it. I will just, suddenly I'm going to expose myself to all of them, and then I will just pick the 5 or 10 that like it. And so I sent off these 60 manuscripts, and within a couple of weeks, I'm starting to get rejections. This is back in the days when people would actually write to you. And so before long, I had like 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and 45 and 51 and 57, 58, 59, 60, and then 61. I sent out 60 manuscripts. I got 61 rejections. One publisher wrote to me twice and said, "Forget it." But I wrote that was when I thought, well, I need another book. And it was after I decided that maybe I could write something in the area of how it is that we find joy and meaning in the face of everyday disappointments, that I wrote Being Happy. So in actual fact, I had 77 rejections before I got a book published. And I often say to people who ask me, maybe you'll only need 30 rejections, or maybe you'll need 100 before you get a book published. But does it really matter? So long as you keep going, and so long as you keep trying to tweak that manuscript and make it better, then eventually you get there, or maybe these days you publish it yourself.
77 rejections on the way to millions of books sold is not too shabby, but the average person would quit after the 3rd to the 10th rejection. Like, by the 3rd rejection, 60% of people have quit. By the 10th rejection, 99% of people have quit. What allowed you to keep going? Like, after the first book, 60 rejections. Wow. And you had an idea for the next book. How did you keep your enthusiasm going?
I think the first thing is that you've got to be excited about what you're doing, and you have to say to yourself, I'm doing something that is useful and is needed and is going to help people, and there's not something quite like the books that I'm writing. And I suppose I did get a little encouragement in that there were people who said we looked at it really closely and we almost said yes. So I had some of those. And I think the other thing is that if you're doing other things at the same time, I was beginning to do a lot of work with weekend seminars. I was sharing my message with um, corporations. I was so I was. It wasn't like that was the only thing that was happening, and so I think very often it's helpful if we've got other irons in the fire, so we're not holding our breath.
This is gold. This is gold. So number one, be excited about what you're doing, and be persuaded yourself that what you're doing is something that's of benefit to the world and to humanity. And secondly, be doing something else that's working. That's important too, right? If you put all your eggs in the one basket, that can get tough.
Yeah, and I think that also translates into if you have a product that you're taking to the world or you're sharing in any way. You go see Nikki and you say, this is what I've got. And if Nikki doesn't like it, then you go see the next guy and you go see the next guy. And you're never waiting to see whether Nikki's going to like it. You do your best and you move on. You do your best and you move on. And the less that we are attached to a result, the less that we become desperate, then the more likely it is that something's going to happen.
Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements, his son wrote a book called On the Five Levels of Attachment. And he talks a lot about being unattached and how powerful that is to live a flowing life. And it sounds like you discovered this in this process for yourself.
I did, Nikki, and I had to, but I think a lot of us have this experience that, we meet someone and we think, I really hope they're going to call me, or I hope this develops into something. But if we hold our breath, if we're desperate, then nothing happens. But if we say, well, I spent a nice evening with them and I'll let that go, and whether or not that leads to anything, I'm unattached. I move on with my life. So, so often we're told that we need to live in the moment. And when we can live in the moment, we're automatically unattached.
Wow. I'm learning a lot from listening to you describe this process to me, and I thank you for that, because I'm going to apply what you've said in my own life. So Andrew, I used to be a top fitness trainer, and
Yes.
about 13 or so years ago, I got out of that field for a variety of reasons. And I got into the world of doing business coaching and seminars like yourself and workshops and so forth. And I loved what I was doing, the new field I got into. But a switch flipped in my head, and I wasn't as focused on my health and fitness. And over a 12-year period, I gained over 50 pounds, right? And every year I tell myself, oh, this is the year you're going to turn it around. And I never did. And last February 2nd, 2023, I looked at myself in the mirror with my shirt off and my belly hanging out over my jeans. And I was thoroughly disgusted and disappointed with myself. And I made a decision in that moment that, okay, this is it. You are really going to turn this around this year. And I did two very smart things in that moment. Number one is I decided that I wasn't going to buy the lie that I was a trainer and I could turn this around, because I wasn't a trainer anymore. And number two is I decided I needed a trainer. I needed someone who knew how to do what I used to know how to do. So I hired a guy, and then I made a really good decision, which was I wasn't going to argue with what he told me. Even though I had a lot of knowledge and background in the space, I was going to do whatever he said. And that was the hardest part, because believe me, at the beginning, I wanted to argue with him about all the advice he gave me. But I just bit my tongue and closed my mouth and put my head down and did what he said. So the long story short is I lost 60 pounds. I entered a bodybuilding competition. I'm 57 years old. I entered a bodybuilding competition for men 20 years younger than me, and I came in third. And next time I do it, I'm going to go enter in a show for men 50 plus, even 55 plus. And what I realized from doing this is, first of all, I look and I feel great. I love it. It's exciting. It's fantastic. But I realized that to truly get to a pinnacle of success, I need to let go of the person that I was and step into the person that I intend to become. And that is challenging. That is tough. And part of that is to no longer be attached to who I was and how I did things. And this conversation you and I are having now is crystallizing what I did and how I did it. And it's helping me apply this to other areas of my life. So for that, I'm extremely grateful, Andrew. Thank you.
Well, congratulations on what you've done, because so many people would have said, well, that was how I was, but I can never go back to that level of fitness because
I'm too old. That's what I told myself for when I hit 50. Yeah, it's 50. Can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you. But this whole question of non-attachment is very, very powerful. And I want to ask you to talk about your new book. And perhaps as you do so, maybe delve a little bit more deeply for me and for my listener about non-attachment and why that matters.
Okay. Well, if we just speak a little bit more about non-attachment, I mean, we see it everywhere. If we look at people that we love or we want to be with, it's interesting that we love babies. You know, most of us are just so attracted to babies, and babies couldn't care less whether you like them or not. And as we develop our intellect and try to and figure out how to maybe get people to like us, we seem to do less and less well. Whereas babies who don't really care and just live are a wonderful example of how it is that we become a magnet for other people by just living and being who we are. And
yes.
And so I think it is with everything we do, if we can bring ourselves back to saying, yeah, I'm doing this job. I'm washing my car for my mother. I don't care whether I'm unattached to whether she thanks me for it, she likes it or not. I'm in the moment and I'm enjoying it. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do. We're giving a speech and we say, all I want to do is share something of value to these people. I'm unattached to whether they think I'm brilliant or amazing. My mission is to be the best I can be in sharing something useful. And so, and similarly, if you're a tennis player, if you can be enjoying it in the moment and unaffected by whether you actually win the point or win the match, then you're always performing better. So much of it comes back to unattachment, just saying, I'm just doing this, being here, enjoying this, and whatever comes of this is a bonus. And similarly, I guess then we're a lot happier at work and we're a lot happier in relationships because we're just saying, I do this because it's my joy to do it, and I'm not attached to the results. And ironically, when we're not attached to the results, then the results tend to come.
That's very true. That's very perceptive. When I was going through the process of doing the workouts and changing my diet, I got to tell you, there were moments it was not a lot of fun, because, well, let's face it, you know, I'd given up all the foods that I liked, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I had to eat according to a certain plan. And I was eating less, so my energy dropped for periods of this. We had to kind of adjust my diet until the point where I was like feeling good, because there was times I felt horrible. But I kept my eye on the goal, and the goal was to look and feel 20 years younger, you know, was to achieve something that I no longer had believed was possible for me anymore, because I bought the lie that you're over 50, it's not going to happen for you. And when that lie was blown up, I got to tell you, Andrew, it made me see that there's so many other things, limitations that I'd bought into, that it was time to frickin' blow those limitations up too. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's amazing how a little bit of success gets us to see other possibilities. Even on a daily basis, I make lists of things that I need to do during the day. But sometimes if I've already done it, I'll put it on my list just because it makes me feel better. And I look at that list and say, there's so much more I can get done today because I can see what I've already achieved. So it's amazing how just making a note of this is where I've come is so helpful. So you were asking about bouncing back. Now, I don't know whether you can see that. So
I can see it. Yeah, it's brilliant.
My brand new book, Bouncing Back, which grew in part out of COVID, but it grew in part out of, I guess, knowing that happy people are resilient people. And so I thought it was worthwhile looking at in a very simple way what it is that happy people, what it is that resilient people do. Why bouncing back? Because we're all bouncing back from something. We're bouncing back from disappointment. We're bouncing back from eating too much or spending too much, or we're bouncing back from being exhausted, or maybe a relationship that didn't work out quite as well as we wanted, or we may be bouncing back from loss or tragedy. So what is it that resilient people do? First thing is that resilient people find purpose in whatever is happening in their life. In other words, they may say, I wouldn't have chosen to be in this situation, but what am I learning and how am I becoming a better person? And very often the things that we thought were breaking us are actually making us. And resilient
good.
people
That's really good.
There's a cartoon for that in Bouncing Back. So resilient people understand that what we thought was ruining our life often sets us up for the next major success. So we can go back and examine some of these. So the first thing is that resilient people find purpose in whatever is happening. The next thing is that resilient people, number two, resilient people accept the things they can't change. And a lot of things we can change. But sometimes we suffer a loss or a tragedy, or we get sacked, or we lose someone dear. There's a point at which we say, I wouldn't have chosen this, but I accept this. So acceptance is power. Acceptance allows us to move on. There's a myth maybe that a lot of us subscribe to, which is, if I accept this rotten moment, then I'll be stuck with it. And the actual truth is that when we accept something that we would rather didn't happen, that is when we get to move on. If we've been badly treated or bullied or let down or sacked, there's a point at which we say, okay, I didn't want this, but I accept it. That's where we get to move on. The third thing that resilient people do is that they look for good things every day. And we have to do that because we find what we look for. If you look for faults in your boyfriend, you find them. And if you look for good things in your life or where you live, or you say, what do I love about my job? What do I love about my family? Then you find things. So to a great degree, our happiness depends on the questions that we ask ourselves.
Yes.
The next thing that we notice that resilient people do, and you touched on that when you were talking about coming back from your being 50 pounds overweight, that resilient people attack life one day at a time. You do your best until bedtime. You get up tomorrow and you do it again. And that is the only we could never carry around everything we need to wear or eat in the next 5 years on our back. You can't do that.
No, that's crazy.
Neither can you carry around all the things that you might need to worry about or all the things that you might need to do in the next 5 years. But you can manage life in 24-hour compartments. Number 5, resilient people just basically, when they fall down, they get back up, because what else are you going to do? At some stage, you have to say, everybody hurts, everybody makes mistakes, everybody fails, and we get back up. I talk a little about the value of goals in bouncing back. What we notice is that whenever we set goals, we feel better. You join a gym, you feel better. You haven't even done anything yet. You decide to tidy your garage, you feel better. You haven't even done anything yet.
Yes.
Any psychologist will tell you that as soon as you begin to take control over your life, you feel happier. And the value of setting goals, little goals, big goals, is that it makes you happier. And the other thing is that when you set out to do something extraordinary, you become extraordinary. If you set out to raise extraordinary children, then you become an extraordinary person. If you set out to build an extraordinary business, then it's just not the business, but it's what it makes of you in the process. And that's exciting. So the 7th thing that I talk about in bouncing back that resilient people do is they imagine a better life. You have to see your life as better in order for it to become better. Whenever you see somebody win like the Masters golf tournament or win an Academy Award, so often they say something like, I was 10 years old and I was already imagining this. I saw this. We have to have a picture in our mind of where we're going. Even happiness begins as an idea. We see ourselves as living a happier life, and then we can move toward it. So we become what we think about, and so we need to see that better life. So those are the 7 things that resilient people do. They find purpose, they accept whatever's happened that they can't change, they look for good things every day, they live life one day at a time, they get up when they fall down, because what else are you going to do? They set goals because we're happier when we take control of our life. And they imagine a better life, because that's where a better life starts.
These are 7 very powerful principles of how to live a resilient life. While you were talking, I went ahead and ordered the book. I know you tried to send it to me, and God, it seemed like someone in Canada Customs opened the package, took the book out, and just gave me the envelope. It was the funniest thing. I've never seen or experienced something like that. I guess someone needed it more than me. So I ordered that book, and that'll be added to my collection of Andrew Matthews books. Listener, Andrew Matthews is a true legend in this space. His books have affected and impacted the lives of millions upon millions of people. I recommend that you buy Bouncing Back, but don't just buy Bouncing Back. Buy his entire book list. When I find an author whose works impact me, I don't just read one book that they've written. I read all of their books. I just go and purchase book after book after book. And right now, these are just 3 of Andrew's books that are here with me. I've got a couple more. Follow Your Heart is fantastic as well. How Life Works was great. And I'll tell you, this body of work is a force for good in the world. And so I just want to, first of all, thank you, Andrew, for having had the courage to make your vision come alive, initially with Being Happy and then with the other books that you have written, for teaching us how to be relentlessly optimistic and move forward, and for continuing to write books to inspire people. It's a beautiful thing. And I want more people from the new generation of younger folks to find out about you and your works and start to read them.
Thank you, Nikki. That I mean, it's my joy to share these things, because the joy for me and Julie, my wife, is my publisher, and so and she's the reason we're in 48 languages. I mean, she's just unstoppable.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I've been so blessed to have this woman married to her now for 33 years, and she's been my publisher for like 25. And I learn from her every day. We get emails and letters from Serbia, from Russia, from Mexico, from Sweden every day. People who say, I found your book unexpectedly. I wrote a story in Bouncing Back of Umi, a lady in Singapore, and she went to see the doctor. She was broke and she was living with her parents. And she said, your book was on the coffee table in the waiting room. And she said, I got to read 7 pages before the doctor called me in. And I had to buy that book. And she said, I borrowed the $20 because I didn't have $20. And she said, I bought the book and I felt better about myself and I felt better about what I could do. She said, I saw an ad on Facebook. Somebody wanted to buy 10 serves of chicken rice for $30. So she said, I went and spent $50 on ingredients and I sold this $30 worth of chicken rice. Now I was $20 down the hole, but she said I'd started something. And she began cooking from the kitchen of her little apartment. And eventually she moved into a commercial kitchen, and she says, today I own a multi-million-dollar catering business. I have a restaurant.
Come on.
Nush Noodle Bar on the Esplanade in Singapore. She has a catering company. And Julie and I had dinner with her in her restaurant on the beautiful Singapore Esplanade overlooking the bay there. Sometimes we just need a little bit of encouragement that we might get from a book or a podcast, and we make a start.
My late father, God rest his soul, told me everyone needs someone to believe in them. And he told me that your job in this life is to provide that little spark of belief by believing in people. Because when their belief in themselves wobbles, sometimes it just takes that little spark to turn into a roaring fire of self-belief inside your fellow human being. And that, my friend, is what you do with your books. And it's a beautiful thing. So if folks want to buy your books, if folks want to find out about the other things you're up to, what's the best way?
Okay, well, the best place to get my books will be Amazon. So Being Happy, Bouncing Back, Follow Your Heart, How Life Works are all available on Amazon. Bouncing Back is now on Audible as of the last couple of weeks, read by me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Follow Your Heart is also on Audible. I have a newsletter. So my website is andrewmatthews.com. Matthews spelt with two T's. So Andrew Matthews, andrewmatthews.com. You can go to my website. I do
we'll put all that in the show notes for you. We'll put the correct spelling in the show notes so no one will mess it up.
Great. So visit my website. I send out a very brief newsletter every 2 weeks, which is just like a cartoon and maybe a couple of sentences.
I love it. I'm in.
And I think people do like something that's brief because we have an extraordinarily high open rate. So I keep it brief, but we do need a reminder every week or two. We need something to just say, yes, I can do this.
I'm going to subscribe myself, and I'm going to encourage everybody to do the same. I think that's a great idea.
Wonderful.
Andrew Matthews, it's been an absolute joy and pleasure to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Nikki. It's been my joy to share something, and let's be connected. Let's stay connected.
Absolutely, we will. And I'm going to find other ways to help you. Listener, Andrew Matthews is the real deal. Go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com to get his website, to sign up for his newsletter. Go to Amazon and purchase his book list, and especially start with Bouncing Back because that's his latest book. And if you enjoyed this, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review, because that helps us with the algorithm and it helps us reach more people who need this message. And if you know someone who's hurting and could benefit from this message, share the episode with them. And that wraps up another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. To find out more about today's amazing guest, the one and only Andrew Matthews, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com or wherever you happen to listen to this podcast, be it iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, Rumble, or what have you. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.